Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, hear a variety of our key takeaways from the People's Company 2025 Land Investment Expo in Iowa. Plus, we'll give you a sneak peek at some new Merschman Enlist E3 soybean varieties coming in 2026.
Hi, this is Joe Merschman. Welcome to Merschman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have our regulars. We got Ben, Dylan, and Lynn, and quite a bit going on this week. The big event that we attended virtually was the 2025 People's Company Land Investment Expo, which was at the Event Center in downtown Des Moines, and really an all-star lineup as far as speakers. And I've actually taken the time, at least from my notes anyhow, to summarize it, and we will attach it so you can read it in detail, and we'll hit some of the high points today of some of the things that we learned. And in general, I would say the tone was cautiously optimistic, particularly with the new administration coming in. In general, there was, if you're a business person, which farmers are business persons, I think they feel pretty comfortable about it, but the tariffs, almost everybody mentioned tariffs. And there was one speaker that talked in depth about tariffs, and we'll discuss that today. It's not, he said it was neither good nor bad. In other words, it's got to be managed right. But anyhow, who wants to start? Anybody want to jump in with any of the things on the first speaker, which is Cliff Kupchan from the Eurasia Group. His background was that he has spent time in Russia and all over the world, and basically kind of gave the big world picture as far as where we're at today, and his first words out of his mouth was, the world today is more dangerous since the 1930s that led to World War II. So he was probably the least optimistic of all the folks, because of there's so many hot spots in this world right now. And he also mentioned that there was a leadership vacuum. There was no real strong leaders. And so whoever shows up as a strong leader, if it's going, maybe it'll be Trump, but we don't know. We'll see. That's going to make a huge difference. But he still firmly believes the United States is going to be the leading country, because he made the mention, he said, who wants to live in China? Would you rather live in the United States or would you live in China? And there's a lot of information about China in my notes. But the most important relationship, he said, over the next 20 years will be the U.S. and China, and how we manage that. So we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. But he expects the Trump administration, as far as agriculture goes, to be 2018 2.0. In other words, soybeans and corn are going to be on the table and be used as pawns. And will Trump subsidize the farmers? That's the key. And I don't know. And so time will tell. But for the rest of the environment that we're in, it looks very positive. So. But I think the key thing that he mentioned about China and some of the threats they do to us is that they've turned off the software on drones now, where it used to be if you flew a drone, if it wouldn't let you fly if you're next to a airport, military installation, or some off target area you're not allowed to go. Now they just put a warning up. So they're basically taking the attitude, let the drones fly, and they said the Mexican cartel and some of the folks are using them for bad things. So we'll see. So those are some of the issues that he talked a little bit about Putin. He's responsible for 1.3 million deaths, which is kind of sad. A very skilled man, great memory, very popular in Russia. And Trump will get a ceasefire deal with Putin. Will it last is what his concern is. And right now Russia is spending about 6% of its gross national product on the war. He said that Russia would win the war because of they're just going to hang around, and Ukraine will eventually fold. In other words, no different than World War II. The Germans came over. Russia just hung in there. They, of course, had a little help from the winter, but in general, Russia is winning the war, in his opinion, just because of they're just going to stay at it. However, they're doing it at a huge cost of losing all of a generation, you might say. he is worried about the axis of Russia, North Korea, and Iran. They said that's a real threat to us. And this is kind of disturbing to me. North Korea wants a missile that can hit Chicago with a nuclear bomb. That's what they want. And Iran wants a nuclear weapon. And if Russia helps them, both of those accomplish those goals, that would be a really bad day for the United States. And Iran has two different components. They talked about it has a right-wing religion and weapons, which is not logical, kind of very radical. But the actual people that live in Iran they actually like the U.S. and like our lifestyles and in favor, lean towards us. He did say within 4 years we will be attacking either Israel or the United States will be attacking Iran to take out their nuclear capabilities, and when that happens, oil's going to spike really high. So anyhow, right now Israel's knocked out Iran's air defenses, and they basically can't defend their oil or nuclear programs at all. And they're 6 months away from a dirty nuclear bomb and 1 year away from a nuclear bomb. So these are things that are going to have to be dealt with as time goes on. Israel continued to assassinate its adversaries, Iranian leaders, destroy their electrical grid. Israel just needs one thing to kind of finish the job, and that's our bunker buster bombs. And if the United States gives them that, then they will finish the job. India is poised to be the growth country in the future, particularly if USA invests. Saudi Arabia is really looking at a lot of into AI, and that's a good news story, we think. And artificial intelligence, AI, just very hard not to be optimistic about it. So anyhow, that's a recap of the first speaker. So we just go on and on and on with more speakers that talk about what their perspective is and where they think things are going. And I know we could spend an hour on this today, but we probably shouldn't. We'll let you read it. And if there anything else, I think the farm credit speaker was really good because he gave some ratios, how to manage debt and what's important to bankers now, how you deal with land. I think the overall discussion was very positive on land. It's been a good investment. It's growing fast. One of the speakers talked about inflation, and what I found was really interesting how they figure inflation today. It is so, I don't know what you want to call it, goofy. In other words, they took a car from 30 years ago and they looked at it, and they looked at a car today, and they took off every option on the new car to get it down to cost what it would be like 30 years ago. And basically, power windows, airbags. I mean, they took all that off, and they come up with a convoluted inflation number that doesn't represent reality. I know when I talk to my brother Henry and I, we think that when inflation was 9%, we think it was 25 to 30 or maybe higher. And so anyhow, just interesting things like that. One of the speakers was not a fan of solar and wind. He said it's a crapshoot, which I don't know exactly. He didn't go into detail how that is, but again, that's to be seen. But anyhow, anything else you guys want to add? I've been doing a lot of talking. I would rather see some of you guys put your spin on it too.
No, I think the other one that I found super interesting was the farmland values and how that relates to us on the farm side of stuff with pretty well known facts that farmland has been a great hedge to inflation. With being farmers, we have a great opportunity there. We have both depreciation at play and appreciation at play. So depreciation from tile, terrace, fences, equipment, all great options. And then also we have, when we talk about inflation, that does lead to decent returns from a balance sheet standpoint when appreciation of land goes up. So, and the other one, I think it was pretty straightforward. When high prices are in real estate, it tends to breed more land sales. So we had seen an uptick, but I think I read the land report the other day. We are seeing just a little bit of a cool down, but overall, I mean, still very solid. If you're a seller, still very solid numbers in the land side of the stuff. kind of stinks if you're trying to buy it. But when we look at the numbers, I thought he brought up a great point when I think most land, it's like a 4% cash on cash return. But a lot of times when people say, like, I don't know how this works, when you look at it from a multi-generational standpoint, land is still a very, very attractive investment. And when we take off, our narrow lens of a 5-year return, 10-year return, and start looking at multi-generational, that's where land tends to be a really great play. So hence why moving, into the $3, $4 corn price, sub $10 bean prices, and we're still seeing some pretty strong land prices. Most of it, like in the state of Iowa, predominantly all still going to farmers. Few local investments, but one speaker that runs a real estate REIT. They don't really do anything with Iowa because they just can't quite get the returns. And part of that is because land prices are high enough because of other influences, which would be your local farmers and your local real estate investors. So from an Iowa standpoint, pretty relieving, I guess, to know that the family farm is still carrying on the legacy of the real estate, that it's not the quote-unquote foreign investors coming in and buying up our ground. In actuality, that's really not what's happening on a broad scale.
I want to say it was 90+%. It was right at that mid, low 90s retention in local.
Yep, and if it wasn't the local farmer, it was a local investors or local investors. So it's in my notes and get the exact percentages that I wrote down. I think the other thing too that I found is that the U.S. economy is very much the envy of the world, and on our gross national product, gross domestic product, is $27 trillion. And what was really interesting was not that many years ago we were the same size as Europe, and now they're 60% the size. They're not growing. We're continuing to grow, and they're looking at. They said if you look at the S&P. Tech is 40% of that percentage, and not only exists in the United States that we have such a heavy weighting on tech, which he said he would not invest in foreign stocks. He said the U.S. is the place to be, and the electric infrastructure is what we need to improve. Because when AI, artificial intelligence, comes in, they got to build these data centers, which is basically these huge amounts of computers, and they use a lot of power. And our infrastructure today cannot do that right now. So it appears that Trump's going to put a big push on electrical infrastructure so we can build these data centers. And when they get these data centers built and all this data is put together, and there's different speakers spoke about this and how managing data is really hard to put it together. But some unbelievable positive things are going to happen. And one of the things is that short term there could be a job loss, but long term the job productivity that's left will go higher. And innovation has always been the keystone to the United States being ahead of the world. And as long as we continue to innovate, we're going to stay in that leadership position. But there's going to be such a demand for power that the nuclear could come back. And they even talked about maybe right next to these power sites might be these mini nuclear plants that would run them, or data centers, I should say.
Yeah, was it Microsoft was looking to potentially bring 3 Mile Island back online, I think is what he had mentioned. So.
Yeah, and I want to say basically the number that has to be increased is something 4 megaton or whatever it is for the demand, but that number has to go to 5. So basically they're looking for a 20% increase in the amount of electricity needed across the United States.
And ancillary to that too, I mean, when you look at the electricity and AI and whatnot, one that tends to be, and they spoke a little bit about it, but oil and gas is going to be a very nice commodity moving forward, because all that stuff requires plastic and generation. When we look at solar, and I think Steve Eisman had mentioned it too, and I know Joe has talked about it, but the amount of oil that it takes to go into producing a lithium ion battery, you're almost better off just buying a gasoline vehicle and running that and be actually greener than the production. So oil and gas is definitely going to be something that's going to be interesting to look at from a production standpoint, because Trump seems to be very heavy about getting that production back online and us becoming a dominant power again.
Well, the 3 great stories today in the United States are AI, artificial intelligence, tech, and infrastructure. Those are the three areas to watch in the future because there's going to be huge investments in all three of those areas. So, and this speaker also did not believe in crypto, so he was not a crypto fan. But he did mention the upper class is doing good, middle upper class is doing good, but on the low end, the lower end consumer is hurting because of inflation. So inflation's really, and believe it or not, that's the demographics that influence the election. So I would assume the working person is going to see Trump reward them as time goes on.
I think you got to talk about the
Iowa getting bigger
there. Iowa getting bigger, Joe. I couldn't decide if that was a joke during the presentation or not, but I've seen it on social media over the past week.
Yeah, they call it the big land deal. Make Minnesota Iowa again, I think is what they call it. And it's actually legit that they're proposing a legislative person in Iowa, Mike, I can't think of Mike's last name, but he wants Iowa to buy the bottom layer of counties in Minnesota, which would be 9 of them. And of course, the Minnesota, it has a liberal fraction to their population, and they call those counties rocks and cows. Is basically that's all it is. And so the folks in the bottom county would benefit from Iowa because we're ag focused and we have lower taxes and lower, just in general, a more favorable to farming, and we have a surplus right now in Iowa. I think of close to $6 billion, and Iowa wants to grow. And this would be a way to grow. It'd add 180,000 additional people to the state of Iowa, and would not change the electoral college. And he says it's been done before. Something to do with the river moving in Minnesota and North Dakota, and they realigned the state boundaries, but it would have to be approved by Congress. So there's also, he said there's a talk about Indiana wanting 33 counties in the southern half of Illinois to move to Indiana. And of course, I would bet those folks that are farm related would not object real bad to that happening. But anyhow, it kind of looks like the red states, without being too political here, the red states are seeing opportunities with some of the rural blue states in these states that are more focused on ag. But anyhow, and this was thought up before the Greenland and Canada thing. So they said they've been working on this for quite a while. Anyhow, that was an announcement that was made at the Land Investment Conference, and then it got spun out from there in social media and the news and everything else. So they did make news at this conference. One of the other speakers that I thought was interesting was, we're talking about Canada and Mexico, and he put things in perspective. 19% of Canada's gross national product comes from exports to the U.S. Mexico's 30% of their exports go to the U.S. So 30% of their gross national product is to the U.S. And he basically said, when we get in there and sit down with them and talk to them about trade, they just got to say yes, sir, because they can't afford to lose any of that. It would destroy their economy. So they have no power to stand up. And those two countries are least important to the United States for our exports, except for farmers. It's very, very important. Mexico is in Canada. So how will that all come out in the end, we don't know. But anyhow, so the current administration that's coming in is actually got a little bit of a stick to move around to get what they want. And they talked about tariffs in general, and President Monroe used tariffs as well as Lincoln and McKinley to protect our cherished manufacturing. And basically after World War II, our attitude changed more to free trade, and we lost all of our manufacturing in the 1970s. It started moving out and it kept going out. But as far as tariffs go, it's neither right or wrong. It's the hardest part is managing it because of currency differences and, doing it the right way. But all of these presidents had good times by using tariffs, and it did not add to inflation and did not add to interest rates. In other words, if done correctly, it can be neither good nor bad. So anyhow, some of the doom and gloom about tariffs may not be warranted. However, I think in ag, they might be, because the fact that, and so it will Trump like he did in 2018, subsidize the farmer to get what we want from these other countries. But anyhow, this speaker went on to talk about how the United States is in this turmoil between basically the Midwest versus the coasts, and some call it the elitists and some call it the rural areas. Well, that actually existed when our founding fathers were putting this country together, except that it was the elitists were the ones that did trade with Britain. They were making a lot of money off the colonies and sending stuff to Britain, and the rural people weren't getting a lot of it. So that's what basically that went on back then, and how Pennsylvania was a big part of it, and how et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line was the rural people and common sense prevailed over the elitists, and are we seeing history repeat itself? I'm not sure, but time will tell. He did also say that last year's income, 2024, was the 8th highest farm income on record. So it's not all doom and gloom on the ag sector. And he did say the 30-year return on ag land in Iowa is 11%. And 1991 to present, 9.45% on farmland return in Iowa if you include subsidies. But anyhow, as crop prices go up, livestock improves, and right now with the other way around, when crop prices go down, livestock improves. So I know that in some sectors, livestock's carrying the load. So anyhow, it talked about meat and demand for meat. It's going to be really strong. People want to eat meat. They said the best food to eat was crickets, because it only takes 1 calorie of feed to make 1 pound of cricket, or equivalent calories in 1-to-1. Where chicken is 3-to-1, and pigs 9-to-1, cattle 13 to 15-to-1. But people want meat, so United
I'll take
States.
A cow over a cricket any day.
So you got a choice, beef or crickets. But anyhow, another interesting fact that maybe we shouldn't even talk about, but crop insurance is 65% subsidized by the taxpayer. In other words, there's a 65% discount off over what it really should cost. And farmers can now insure in some areas up to 95% of their revenue. And I think the farm credit guy said, 65% may not be right. You better be looking at your crop insurance and making sure you got your risk covered. And again, the last point the speaker talked about was an eye for an eye. And when it comes to a trade policy, means that both of us will go blind. So in other words, you got to have a balance if you're going to have a trade deal. And I think Trump's plan is to get their attention with tariffs, but to get what he wants. And I think he's I don't think he's going to abandon the American farmer. I just don't see that.
Nope, can't argue with any of that.
I come away with one fun expression that I'd like to share and note, and I think Joe has it on here too, but there has not been if you buy ground, you'll never get a good deal, because the last good deal was Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah, and I put what that cost in there, and it was a pretty good deal. We paid 4.3 cents per acre for the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. In today's dollars, that would be $1.12 an acre.
So you might have thought you got a good deal, but that's the benchmark.
So that's where it was.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings that they had was that China knows that each state has 2 senators and at least 2 cows in each state. So they know how to, they know what tariffs do to our ag system. So
the last speakers, I didn't have really good notes on it. I was getting wore down for the day, for number one. Number two is he spoke so fast. And that was Joe Lonsdale from 8VC, and you can look him up. but he was talking at the day one of Trump's administration, there's going to be over 100 changes. I mean, it's going to be like a machine gun firing, this rapid change. And there's going to be a lot of people who aren't happy, particularly government people. He said there's a lot of lazy people in government, and they're going to get shook up. And he was big on AI. He just hopes that they don't regulate it, let it run. Because he said when you start regulating things, you slow down the growth. He said, yeah, we'll have to make some adjustments, but don't get ahead of it. In other words, with regulation. And he actually said that the universities have become so woke that they're holding things back with their thinking, and regulations kill growth. It's just fascinating all the things that he was seeing, and then he was talking about talent. He said California has a ton of talent, but they have their infrastructure and everything they got out there is just anti-business. So he's moving stuff to Texas and his businesses. However, he tries to get some of these folks, from Stanford and whatnot to move over, the geniuses to come over there in Texas, and they're really not wanting to. He says, so you got to have a balance, because you need talent. You need a positive environment to grow a business. But he talked about a lot of opportunity, and he's really, everybody is artificial intelligence, just talking about what that's going to do. One speaker even said it could possibly cure cancer because it has that kind of power. So it's an exciting time that we're in, and I would say the tone of the meeting was very positive. Very positive. We got Iran, we got China, and we got Russia, but hopefully we got a leader that he'll walk softly and carry a big stick to get the job done. But I can't thank Steve Brewer enough for the hard work he puts into this meeting, because it's one of the premier meetings, I think, in the United States. It's a one-day meeting, so it doesn't kill a lot of your time. You can do it virtual, you can do it in person, but as I understand it, in person was standing room only. It was a sold-out event. And I don't know how many people were reviewing it. And people from all over the world come to this meeting, come to Des Moines. And one of the speakers, which I thought was really interesting, this is a real compliment to folks in the Midwest. He says, I love coming to Iowa. Absolutely love it, because the people are so nice. He said, I'm just not used to that. And he's a coastal, in other words. And so he came from Iowa, and he went to the coast. So he says, I always enjoy coming to this meeting because the people in the Midwest are so genuine. So it tells you how good that we have it here. And we just, like in Iowa, like the movie, is this heaven? No, it's Iowa. So, and I could say the same thing about the Midwest. So anyhow, that's my 2 cents on everything. I did write out as detailed notes as I possibly could, and we have a link to it. You can read it, but I think I got about 9 pages of notes. So, but it's pretty good size type, and a lot of numbers and statistics. And if you got any questions, the nice thing about doing it online, Lynn signed up, Ben and I each all signed up. It was $150, but they will post those speakers again. We get to watch them again, and then the FarmCon, as in the past, after a month or so, they post them on YouTube, and that's available to anybody, if I remember correctly. So if they're publicly available, any of these speakers, we will sure get them on Cup of Joe so you can watch them yourself. Perfect. Anything else? I think, Ben, you had a couple things you wanted to bring up on weed control.
Yeah, it's something we didn't get to talk about last week because we ran out of time, but there was a student at University of Illinois that already has his master's, and he's working on his doctorate, and his name is Caleb Wepprecht, and he works under Aaron Hager, and he was one of the speakers that was talking at the Crop Advantage series, which we had a meeting in Burlington last week. So a couple of the things I wanted to mention that came out of his presentation here was pH control is extremely important. Herbicides that are working on acidic soils or pHs lower than 6, or alkaline soils, which are pHs that are higher than 7, the herbicides don't work as well. So, it's just one more reason why you want to make sure that your pHs are in check. One of the things that's driving and changing pH a little bit more rapidly than normal is for every unit of sulfur that you have in comparison to nitrogen, you're dropping your pH twice as fast. So one of the things to think about as, we're getting 35 pounds of sulfur on average for a corn crop. That in equivalent, you're not putting 200 pounds on like you would with nitrogen, but if you have that 30 pounds compared to the 30 pounds of nitrogen, you're cleaving the calcium off twice as fast with sulfur, which we know that from being in the Neo-Kinsey classes that we've taken, that sulfur is the fastest way to basically make salts out of certain elements and drive them out. So that was one thing that he wanted to hit on there. HPPD resistance, which are bleachers, they are having a major problem in Illinois with not being able to kill water hemp with the HPPDs. So that would be your Callistos, your Lotuses, and products
Balance.
of that nature. Yep, Balance is another one. They're really struggling, and where they think that is coming from is there's two different types of resistance in the weed populations, and there's target site resistance, which builds up slowly over time, and then there's metabolic resistance. And metabolic resistance, he did a good job explaining it, is the exact same way that a corn plant can basically diffuse atrazine, and atrazine doesn't hurt the corn plant. What happens with some of the metabolic resistance, though, is if we get this resistance to HPPD, now we also have resistance to other classes that are completely different, so like 2,4-D. We have fields semi-locally here that we had some issues with getting cleaned up with water hemp last year, and we took plants in and got plant samples back, and they were in fact HPPD and group 4 resistant. So one of his main talking points when it comes to killing water hemp and corn was you have got to kill the rescue treatment with coming back with like Status or Diflex doesn't work if that water hemp's more than 4 inches tall. And most rescue treatments don't happen at 4 inches tall. So if you're having these issues, make sure that your first post program has high rates, and sometimes this can cost up to $50 an acre if you're using full rates of Status, making sure that you're using Status in your first pass rather than trying to come back and rescue it in the second pass, because you have way less growing points that you have to try to diffuse that herbicide through, or to get that water hemp to metabolize. So
He made a strong point too that if you're doing Enlist E3 soybeans, if you're using Enlist 1, you must put it with Liberty.
Yep.
In other words, those two together don't do one without the other. He didn't quite emphasize that there's some kind of connection there that makes both products work better, but he did strongly suggest that those two together make it a much powerful combination. Never do one by itself. Never do one by itself. He just kept saying it over and over and over. He used both of them together.
And he came from a unique perspective because he worked in retail for 6 or 7 years before he went back to work on getting his master's. And he came from a unique perspective, a refreshing perspective that we don't always get out of the university.
A real life perspective.
Yeah, exactly. And he had some funny stories, like I'm sure all retailers do, that he knew that the rescue application wasn't going to work, or he knew he had resistance in the headlands on certain fields and farms, and he was walking his way through some of that stuff. But the main takeaway, or the main driver from what he was talking about, was that if water hemp is the main concern, and it's no longer lamb's quarter or some of the other small seeded broadleaves, metribuzin needs to be in the program, and metribuzin needs to be hit a lot harder. He talks about the group 14, which would be the PPOs, which we've talked a lot about, which would be your Sonic, Authority, Fierce, Valor products. Those products are better at controlling other weeds, but they're not as good as metribuzin when it comes to controlling water hemp by itself. So he has trial work, and we'll put this whole his PowerPoint, we'll put that all up in Cup of Joe so you can scroll through it and look at all the different pictures. But when the fields break from a full use rate of metribuzin, which he's suggesting 12-ounce rate, the only thing that breaks in these fields is grasses. So in the PPOs, you eventually get water hemp breaking through fairly quickly. He says that he oftentimes gets asked what's the difference between we have atrazine resistance in Waterhemp. What's the difference between, because it's the same class, it's a group 5, what's the difference and why does metribuzin still work? Well, we have not stopped using atrazine, but we have basically stopped using metribuzin for the past 30 plus years. And atrazine is a symmetrical molecule where metribuzin is a asymmetrical molecule, and it makes it harder for that plant to metabolize that product with it being asymmetrical. So even though they're both part of the same herbicide class, they don't work on that target action the same way. So I thought that was interesting. We've gotten a lot of questions on metribuzin since the University of Illinois is pushing on this a lot harder. Hager talked about it 2 years ago at the Iowa State meetings that he was at, and now they have other people pushing this as well, and it's definitely something to look into. If you know that you have resistance to the HPPDs and you know that your weed control on certain fields hasn't been as good, looking at fuller rates of metribuzin is something that you probably want to look into to get the water hemp under control.
And financially, it's not a bad program at all.
No. So coarse sandy soils, it's an 8-ounce rate. Is what he was suggesting. For the normal 3% organic matter style soils, it's 10 to 12 ounces.
And it can burn the plant in certain conditions too. I mean, when
high pHs.
High pH, yeah. So, and I can tell you, we did a metribuzin back then. Metribuzin was one of the major products back a long time ago, and we did cross the test plot with different rates to look at the difference in the soybeans and whatnot. And I can tell you, we were up at the 2x rate that spring, and we had no damage at all. We couldn't tell it from the check. And then some years it can give you some burn, but the bottom line is it is a product that's working. But make sure you know a little bit about your pH and your rates and your soil type, and make sure you do it right.
Yep, and because I was getting so many questions from the MS Tech perspective, you probably aren't going to be seeing metribuzin ratings on soybeans from last year moving forward, because they really weren't seeing any differences, not big enough differences to see yield loss. They could see a little bit of phyto symptoms on what that soybean plant looked like, but they weren't getting enough to reduce stand or reduce yield. So you're not going to be seeing metribuzin rates moving forward. But I was going back and looking through what the protocol was, and they were using 12-ounce rates when they were doing their screenings. So something to just keep in mind, that all of the products are very strong. pH is going to be your first thing that you got to watch out for, so you don't have any high pH spots. And the second would be, you don't want to be using full rates in lighter soil types. The only other thing that I wanted to add, that when you were talking about Liberty, never, ever, ever drop below 40 to 43 ounces of Liberty when you're spraying it with your Enlist. If you are in problem fields and you are attacking that 4-inch tall water hemp, full rates of Liberty, are what is needed. So 40 to 43 ounces is what he suggests. The full rate of 32 ounces of Enlist is definitely something he suggests. Crop oil and AMS, get used to speckling the beans up a little bit, getting that mix a little bit hotter to get the cuticles wiped off, and getting that herbicide into the actual plant is extremely important. 20 gallon of water is the minimum now, and they are doing a lot of their trials at 20 gallon of water, whether it be corn, soybeans. They feel that the carrying volume is extremely important to get good coverage. So I think that's what I had from that.
Dylan, you were going to talk a little bit about seed production?
Yeah, so we just wrapped up kind of with a big sales period, and orders have really came in. It's given Shannon a really difficult time, just because orders are changing so much, which is a good problem to have. But we've got beans rolling across the scales every day. Really great quality. Everything's been good from when we talked about it coming out of, or from harvest. They're holding quality through the bins. Bin germs are still coming back good, and then even lot samples with untreated starting line plus, they've all been fantastic. We haven't had to worry about it at all. We've got a really good supply of everything, but then it seems like Jake and the crew over in the plant, they're trying to outrun Shannon, which is a good thing. They're trucking along, but the quality coming out is really good, so that's good to see, because we're not maybe pushing too hard. We don't have to worry about that. They've got everything set. everything's rolling. But then as we're already thinking about 25 growing season, Ben's putting the finishing touches on seed production for this coming year. We were seeing some really kind of good products, fantastic products coming through the lineup that are going to be really exciting to see this year on new acres that will be coming into the lineup that have a lot of yield, top end yield coming out of it, disease packages that are good as we're going through tech sheets, and then some new Peking lines too. We're moving kind of up in maturity. We're going to go to a 3.6 Peking, which I think will get quite a bit of traction just because that's pretty new in that territory. It just seems like everything's kind of stopped at that 3.0, 3.1 range, and now that we're seeing the yield coming out of those Pekings in that 3.6 range is good to see.
I think we're going to sell a lot of that 3.6 in a year from now, just because there's a lot of bean on bean acres, and guys are trying to, number one, they're either looking at their cash flow, not wanting to spend the extra money on putting corn in the ground for the guys that can't consistently get 220 bushel an acre corn. And I think a 3.6 Peking is just the thing a lot of guys are going to want.
Have you named it, Ben?
We did name that product. We'll have it for test plots this coming year. I won't have anything extra to get set out, but that product is a Madison, I believe. It would be a 2636 Peking.
Okay.
I know it's a broken record, but we talk about it after we get done with the seed production, that it's the best year yet from a product lineup as far as the ability to handle variety of soil types, replacing some of our very strong products with even better products. And I think this year, the one thing that stood out to me this month, talking with a person that's familiar with the industry, that for those that are planting Merschman seeds, most likely we are a year, if not more, ahead than a lot of our competition by having some of these new beans in our lineup, and just the way that Ben and Dylan work together to put products in. That there's going to be some really popular products you potentially could see from someone else, but they're going to be 2 years behind the ball, and the way we've seen the I wouldn't say the turnover, but the way that the pipeline has grown and the product's coming out, I wouldn't want to be setting on a 2-year-old product right now, because the horses keep getting faster coming out of the stable right now.
Yeah, and to kind of add to Lynn's point too, we will have, I think we're going to have 6 experimental lines that won't have a name, which is good to see too, because we're already trying to get above what is coming, that's coming down the pipe. So we can already get ahead of, we have limited quantity this year, then we can ramp it up for 26 production if we continue to go on at those lines. And
you're really talking about 27 production, so we're working 2 years out.
Yep. So
and we got a compliment from a customer, as we've discussed before. The 2337 Monroe has been a very popular bean, and moving on to the 2537. The conversation, I was a little bit nervous how that was going to turn out, and the comment made was, "Well, I trust you." So I think that's a huge badge of honor that we have, that when we move on from something that's extremely popular like the Monroe to the new Monroe, our customers know that what we put in front of them is the best of the best.
Sometimes I got to tell you, just trust me.
It'll be okay.
I have to have a third party verify that. So the farmer saying that gave me a little more resolve.
And we're coming out with a new name too, Reagan, and that maturity. You might talk a little bit about that one too. That's coming.
Yes, there is a 26 series 3.5 Reagan, and our growers would have known it as the just 26 35s in the test plots from last year, and it was a very, very, very strong yielder. And we're going to have that scattered out both in seed production and a few bags here and there all across our sales footprint. But it was very, very hard when making the decision on getting rid of the Kennedy and renaming that one the Kennedy. So we had to bring a whole new name in, because there's a whole new level of yield enhancement here. So
couldn't let you do it.
Yeah, we had to keep the king around for a little while longer.
yeah, but you never know. It seems like that 3.5, 3.6, 3.7 range is kind of a powerhouse. It's coming down the line, and we just felt like we couldn't quite kick the Kennedy out yet. Sales are still hanging in there. So
yeah, and it's a 2018 model. If you think about the first year we did it in seed production, and it's still 104.5% over test average. Last year was 109.5%. So Kennedy's still my baby.
Not to drag on an episode, but the reason, I think why if somebody asked me why the 3.5, 3.6, 3.6, 3.7, part of the reason with that is, our folks down south, you guys have taken a liking to having very high yielding early products. And I think these beans in particular fit that mold to continue to, fit that product that you're looking for, that you want something that has good stress tolerance, but also a yielding product. And then, from our philosophy of making sure that it runs from Nebraska to Indiana and from Minnesota to Mississippi, all these products are looking like in the testing and in all the data that we're seeing fit that mold.
That's the goal.
Well, I'll just finish this conversation up with, we have had 3 perfect seed lots so far this year, which even having one is pretty incredible, and that's with 100% purity. We've not had 100% germ yet, but we've had 3 100% purity lots so far this year, as a testament of the guys in the plant and our seed growers, because you have no chance to produce perfect seed unless you have good seed growers. And I got to give a tip to the hat to our seed growers and to the guys in the plant, and that just makes you want to get up earlier every day when you put out perfect seeds. So they go on the wall in the seed plant as like a state championship. We're real proud of our perfect seed lots. Well, we got a new president going to be sworn in on Monday. So I thought, well, let's do some presidential jokes, to get warmed up for it. And believe it or not, in Iowa, the governor has proclaimed that the flag's got to go up to the top for the day in honor of the new president, and of course then back down to half-mast for Jimmy Carter, who just passed away. So which U.S. president starred in sci-fi movies? Which U.S. president starred in sci-fi movies? Ronald Reagan, okay? Now, okay. Why was Herbert Hoover, he was an Iowa president, the best president? Why was Herbert Hoover the best president? He gave a damn. Hoover Dam. Okay, we got to explain them, but they're not too good, right? All right. In what state was George Washington born? I bet most of you don't know this. In what state was George Washington born? Naked and crying, just like the rest of us. How many senior presidential age does it take to change a light bulb? None. They're supposed to keep the president in the dark. No comments there. Please. How can you tell the difference between a president and an actor? How can you tell the difference between a president and an actor? One leads the land while the other one lands the lead. Okay? Okay, now, I'll finish with my bar joke, okay? A Democrat and a Republican walk into a bar. They sit down, order drinks, and have a great time. The bartender says, "Is this a joke?" Let's hope that's the way it works for the next 4 years. That everybody gets along and we get some good things done to help this country and help the world. With that, it's a long episode. We're pretty excited to bring some of this information to you. Maybe it'll be something that can help your operation be profitable. I know it's going to be a tough one this year. We got to watch our P's and Q's because we're going to have a lot of volatility. I hope your family is safe and healthy, and we'll see you next week.